everyone. I'm Malti and welcome to Product Talk with Malti. First, a huge thank you to every single one of you who has been tuning in, liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you are new here, welcome. You are in the right place. But before we dive in, I just want to ask you for one thing. If you find value from these conversations, hit that subscribe button. Why? Because every time you subscribe, you help us reach more ambitious product builders, thinkers, founders, and product folks. Now grab your coffee, your notebook, and that second tab you pretend is work. And let's jump into today's episode. Excited to have Apurva Shrivastava today, who is a senior product tech leader at Amazon. In the past, he has worked with Visa and he has led SaaS, payment solutions, and e commerce product. You're right. Today, we are going to talk about product management in a regulatory space. And in this conversation, Apur beautifully touched upon what are some of the opportunities, what are some of the challenges that a PM in the compliance space has to deal with. How does one manage their stakeholders? What are the trade offs one has to make in order to make decisions between user experience versus regulatory requirement? How are some of the ways that a product manager can leverage AI as a technology in order to build products which delights them and still keeping regulatory requirements in place? So watch out for all these answers in this episode. Hey Apurva, welcome to this episode. Super happy to have you here today.
Same here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's dive into the discussion for today. You've been somebody who's been managing products in the compliance space from payments, and now you're also managing a two-sided marketplace, right? So let's get started. That what is the regulatory influence in a multi-sided marketplace, and how does that impact your strategy and decision making?
Got it. So regulatory frameworks, they significantly impact two-sided marketplace, or in general, any marketplace where any kind of transaction or payment activity is happening. It happens through either your KYC, AML. So KYC, for those who don't know, is know your customer, and AML are anti-money laundering activities. So there are regulatory bodies out there in different geographies which lay out regulations that ensure that no money laundering or terrorism financing, etc., these kind of bad actors are transacting on your platform. So regulations are laid out by different regulatory bodies, and then your company or your marketplace have to adopt to it. What does this adaptation looks like? It can be doing ID verification for KYC, doing transaction monitoring to ensure all transactions are happening in the right spirit. There is no anti-money like money laundering happening anywhere, so on and so forth. And I can go deep in that space. There are a lot of different regulations and compliance activities that needs to be done. Um, One of the challenges or the biggest challenges, different geographies have different regulations. So, for example, some of the common ones that we know are GDPR in EU, and EU is notoriously very, very highly regulated entity. But we have in US as well, CCPA in California. Forms Act was recently, I think it was done in 2023 or sometime around that time, which impacted all the marketplaces in US. Yeah, so this is like how in general the compliance landscape looks like, which is, I should say, more of regulatory landscape looks like and how it impacts all the marketplaces. How it impacts strategy is there are basically two ways to look at it. First is proactive, second is more reactive. Things like Informs Act, when it comes into picture, and I'll just double click on it. For example, let's take example of Etsy. Etsy operates in US, and now Inform Act comes into picture. Inform Acts, what it said is, hey, all your sellers, you have to do bank account verification. One of the requirement was do bank account verification for all your sellers, whoever are selling on Etsy. And at the same time, if someone is getting disbursement of more than X dollars amount, you need to publish the name of the seller on your website. So now it becomes, now how it translates to any company is, A, you need to be compliant. So you need to ensure you're doing bank account verification, which is also good for your trust and safety of the company because you want good sellers to sell on your platform, not bad actors. And then B, when you have to now publish the seller's name along with certain details that are required by the regulatory bodies, it becomes a UX challenge. So now it becomes a technical challenge You can look at it as a challenge, or you can essentially um, figure out creative UX strategies to make it more customer obsessive and put it in a way that, hey, we are so transparent, so on and so forth, and comply with those regulations in a smart way. So that is the core essence of how it impacts any marketplace strategy. Um, yeah, but happy to dive
And how,
deeper.
yeah, no, I mean, it takes me back to my own days. I mean, I've done a lot of fintech as well.
Hmm.
So would be very keen to understand, and especially I think a lot of our audience is also aspiring PMs and,
Hmm.
somebody who's looking to get into fintech. So a question here would be that with these kind of, as you said, there could be challenges or there could be regulatory things which are very proactive. That means you are aware of
Hmm.
it and you are able to
Yeah.
navigate through your strategy in a very planned way, for example.
Hmm.
But there could be also things which come to you at a very short notice, or it could be more a reaction to something that happened in the market,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, as a PM, how do you navigate around in both these situations?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think that's the biggest challenge in this space. One of the things that can be done, which sits at the border of proactive and reactive approach, is having horizon scanning. Now, this can be a tool. There are tools out there in the market that you can buy or like avail services of, or you can build something in-house. Because one critical aspect of regulations is it doesn't happen like, hey, there's a regulatory body that lays out certain regulation today, and they say, hey, you have to be compliant by next month. They give you
Hmm.
enough time. The challenge is the technical teams don't know about them until it's too late. So I think that is the gap that can be bridged, and how we can bridge it is by having proper horizon scanning mechanisms. What it means, horizon scanning, is again taking example of different marketplaces. I'll just name A and B, right? In EU, marketplace B was subjected to missing certain regulations, and you are A, you can basically have mechanisms in place which are tracking what is happening in different marketplaces in different regions, and then take inputs from there and see, hey, are we actually doing these compliance controls? Do they exist in our stack? If they're not, I think we should do it as priority one before regulators come after us. Or in general examples, like whenever any regulation is laid out, so it doesn't it so regulatory bodies lay out, like they keep on slashing regulations, but not every regulation impacts your marketplace, right? So what is important is A, to figure out on time what are the new regulations, and B, to have mechanisms to understand whether they impact your organization or not. And if it does, you can easily bake it up into your backlog, into your strategy, so on and so forth. And why it doesn't happen in general is because compliance, by the name of it, it's not a very fancy space to be in. It sounds like, oh, it's just another cost center, right?
Yeah.
Because we are not directly shelling out features for the users. But I think that mindset needs to change, especially now because regulations are becoming stricter. Most of the geographies are highly regulated. Marketplaces have become very strict to operate on. So I think the mindset that needs to change is that compliance should be viewed more as a trust building competitive advantage rather than being a cost center. Once we have that from leadership, I think then it makes sense to bake certain compliance section in your BRD. Yeah, if you have BRDs, PRDs, and with chat PRD and all of it, it becomes so super easy now. You just have to probably put a prompt in that this is the feature we are launching. Will it be impacted by any kind of compliance regulation that are already in marketplaces or already in our system? Um, Sorry, I digressed there a bit into BRDs, but I think keeping a mindset that it should not be an afterthought that, hey, let's build out a feature, especially when you are in a regulated space, and then we'll figure out if we need compliance controls. But it should be a before thought that, okay, we are trying to build certain feature, certain marketplace. What would be the compliance requirements, and bake them in early on than later.
Yeah, I think rather than them dictating what's needed, how do you kind of take it along? That could become, probably your competitive advantage and stay ahead of
Yeah.
the curve. I think
Exactly.
that's a great way. And I really like the way that you said, we need to keep tracking it. that what is happening, need to look at the ecosystem. And yes,
Hmm.
I think most of the time the regulators are reasonable enough to give us time to unpack the requirements,
Yeah, yeah,
understand, and to be able to respond to that, right?
true,
And
true.
kind of, if I have to take that to the next step, right? I mean,
Hmm.
when we talk about um, a multi-sided marketplace,
Hmm.
some of the foundational aspects of that is that how trustworthy is it,
Hmm.
because there could be bad
Yeah,
actors, there could be frauds, especially right now we all are in an era where all our information is out there.
yes.
At least in this part of the world, digital arrest, for example, is a
Hmm.
very very common fraudulent issues that we are facing.
Hmm.
Now, in this context, how do you make sure that your platform is like compliant, it is
Hmm.
keeping people safe, make people feel safe?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. So first we have to understand like compliance is a game of percentage. When I say percentage, it's like we can try and be 100% compliant, but we can never say or with 100% confidence that we are 100% compliant. Why I say that is, for example, I am a seller, right? And I'm a good seller. And the system basically evaluates me and says, yeah, this guy is perfectly fine. We should allow them. But 1 month later, something happens to me, and I'm like, no, I'll do some kind of money laundering, right? So like the platform cannot be liable or like responsible for certain people's behavior. What they should do is have mechanisms in place to catch them on time. So, okay, so that's like more of a pre-context that compliance is mostly a game of percentages. We can say we are 99% compliant, but anything can happen. So, how we can make sure we have systems in place. And that's why, especially in the AI-driven generation or like a landscape that we are in, compliance should be viewed as like two parts. There's definitely should be a human in the loop when we are talking about compliance because of the same reason. AI is evolving, so the methods and means to catch bad actors are evolving. At the same time, new kind of bad actors are evolving as well. So it's always a cat and mouse game, and it'll keep happening. So this is all where things are happening in an automated way, right? For example, new kind of threats are coming in. At the same time, we are building either in-house or we are outsourcing um, technologies that can catch those threats. For example, ID verification. I'm just taking another example because ID verification is the most common use case. Document, like for example, if someone is submitting your DL, right, for verification, how do I check through liveness detection that the document is correct? Maybe there were certain ways to do that until now, and new kind of document forgery would come in, and then again liveness detection 2.0 probably would come in, but there might still be some cracks through which the bad actors are able to pass through. And then to catch that 1%, let's say if this is the 99% of the cases, for 1% we usually have human in the loop, or should have human in the loop, kind of system where people are actually checking for very high risk entities, whether the person who is saying the person is person A, are they actually person A? And that's where all the game of compliance, I think, it comes into picture. How we can reduce that 1% to 0.1% and make sure 99.9% of the activities are happening in the automated zone, because it reduces your cost, it is much faster, it is much more customer obsessed, so on and so forth. So I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but this is how especially PM should look this space in in AI or your Gen AI era of how we should evolve. The basic idea remains same, that it's going to be automated plus human in the loop. The focus is how do we reduce the human in the loop by evolving better, and keeping in mind like what are the new trends. For example, if someone doesn't even know that some certain kind of forgery is happening, and you don't have those systems in place, the ratio is going to fall apart. So that's I guess the biggest focus for PMs in compliance space.
Yeah, constantly look at how do we eliminate them. And actually,
Yeah.
probably would love to hear some, impact that, for example, you spoke about, you are kind of looking at leveraging AI or Gen AI in order to
Hmm.
identify and reducing that, from 1% to hopefully by like, zero point zero 0.01 or maybe even 0.001%. But in general, I just wanted to kind of understand what is the kind of impact that you really have seen, across industry, especially in e-commerce, that
Mhm.
how effective has AI been really to be able to bring down these kind of, let's say, frauds, or to be able to just identify those, bad actors. What is your take on that?
I mean, it's been really, really impactful, like highly impactful. So, for example, let's take example again of ID verification, right? ID verification can mean different things for different people and for different geographies again. Like in US, it can be your driver license or passport. In EU, uh, mostly companies tend to rely on credit unions because there's no centralized government body. In India, there is Aadhaar card. In Brazil, there is an organization called Serpro, which is like the centralized body. It's like Aadhaar card kind of situation there as well. Now, how AI has evolved in this space is specifically like your multimodal ID verification, where you are also, for example, if you are trying to do ID verification, and one of the company that does it really well, which I've worked closely with. How they do it is when you are registering, you upload your ID, and then if you're on your app, you take your picture, and then they do your live picture and your ID's picture match. So they do it at multiple levels. First, they verify whether your driver license is authentic or not. So that's your document verification. Then they check whether the picture on your document is the correct picture. It's not like forged. That's through your liveness detection. Then third, they take your picture. So that is your biometric. Your biometric is coming into picture. And then at fourth step, they match your live picture with the document's picture, right? So, and it can go like even multiple levels. This is just like a very basic example. So your multimodal ID verification, you are taking sources from different places and identifying the same person. Chances of getting away with it are very less. If you have these kind of systems in place, your
Mhm.
ID verification becomes really strong. And that is how then using AI, and all of these are like AI techniques. Probably not Gen AI, but these are like all AI techniques like detection, etc. And they're like centralized bodies that actually rate your liveness engine for your company, etc. There are like grades to it, and your aim should be at the highest grade. I think it's called NIST or something. I might be wrong, but there's some organization. But when you are doing, or when there's like AI helping us do ID verification, multimodal ID verification in such a nice manner, the chances of leaking bad actors for manual investigation reduces drastically.
Still watching? That means you're finding value in this conversation. And there's coming more on your way. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We drop episodes, tips, behind the scenes content regularly. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.
One instance where AI has significantly improved this landscape. The other would be, again, using AI. How can we detect fraudulent accounts? Now, it can be done through like different, for example, I can have five different accounts on a marketplace, and I might be very subtle in doing any kind of fraudulent activity, but do I have a graph system in place which track different histories for different users and also track IP addresses and similar kind of transactions. For example, I'm making five good transactions and suddenly I'm buying, although this would be flagged, but just giving an example, I'm buying a suitcase for 500K. So although this kind of transaction is flagged right away, but just giving example, if I'm trying to subtly do something in between, is my system able to track it, catch it, and flag it? So this all happens through AI because we can't have just rule-based systems. We definitely have rule-based systems because we also don't want to employ AI for everything, which can be done simply by rules. For example, if I'm buying a pencil for $1 million, there that's your biggest red flag there, right?
Correct.
Similarly, pattern recognition for transaction behavior. So another thing that happens in compliance spaces, you have to do transaction monitoring, and then at scale of bigger marketplaces, it's the transactions are millions of transactions for billions of dollars. So it's a big convoluted system. So how do you actually recognize patterns of what are the different kind of frauds that can happen, and whether it's happening even one transaction out of those millions or billions of transactions can, how do we say that this can be a fraudulent one or not? And again, it's the same flows, same system flows. Someone flags it, says, okay, it might be a fraudulent transaction. When it's a case of it might, it goes to a manual. transaction because we don't want to highlight a good transaction and say, hey, no, this was fraud when it was not. So because it comes to the reputation of the two-sided marketplace. So the better the system is, the better your um, the less it goes to the manual intervention, and then the better your reputation is. So yeah, in that space, these are different examples where AI has like highly impacted the quality of controls that we have.
Yeah. No, I think these are some brilliant examples, and I'm sure you've kind of seen it personally in place that how they have been very, very impactful, right? So
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
now I think you also spoke about a couple of things, right? Where I mean, till the time the system learns and it is getting better, you need to
Hmm.
kind of bring in a human in the loop. Now,
Hmm.
one critical aspect, and especially this is like even more super critical in a marketplace kind of a thing, where you want your user to quickly make a decision, buy it, and complete the
Hmm.
transaction, finish that. So,
Yeah.
how do you balance, this whole, especially with a whole lot of compliance and
Um,
regulatory needs versus giving a slick user experience, right? So, as a
mhm.
product manager who's been into the thick of it, what are the kind of trade-offs that you do? How do you manage that?
Okay, that's a very interesting question because that's a constant fight. And especially as a PM, you are kind of stretched between providing the right CX for the user and also making sure that your system is compliant. You're talking about a trade-off. So, okay, let me try and put it this way. The answer is uh, so the, I'll answer on both sides. On the customer part, you have to be very creative with the CX. For example, if a user is making a transaction and Etsy, I'll keep taking example of Etsy, right? I like something on Etsy, okay, and I'm like, okay, I need to buy this $100 painting, and I'll use a gift card, right? And gift cards are highly regulated. If people don't know it, because they are the main source of money laundering. And when I put my gift card there, if Etsy comes and tell me, hey, you have to wait for 10 minutes because we are doing some checks, and then you'll be able to use gift card. So either I won't use gift card, or let's say not 10 minutes because it doesn't have any time. Let's say 1 hour. If there's human in the loop system, uh, conventional compliance system is like, okay, we will let you know whether you can use a gift card in 1 hour. I don't have that much time. No one has that much time. Either I'll use my other payment method or just like cross the tab and like I don't want to transact on Etsy. It's nonsense, right? So how do you navigate that? So you navigate that by different, again, very creative techniques. Either it can be again both proactive, reactive kind of situation. You can just let the user use the gift card, and later in few hours, if you find that hey, this can be a fraudulent activity, you can block the transaction and not ship the product. So for that, now you have to work with a lot of different systems within your company, um, which is actually your CX team, your payments team, right? Everyone has to be on board. Your legal team, whether you can actually do it or not, I don't know if we can do it, to be honest. If you can just allow the transaction and then block it later, you also have to then work with your fulfillment team because hey, some transactions are coming. We started working on it, and now we have to stop. So this can be one way. Uh, Other can be when a gift card is getting added, you can try and do KYC of that buyer or seller right then. But how do we make sure that it's happening so fast that by the time we reach to the payment page, uh, we have all the details? And if we don't have all the details, what should I tell the user? So these are like constant trade-offs. Also, on the compliance side, then as a PM, the idea is to understand clearly with your stakeholders what does compliance mean here, right? For example, if we take the same example, if I know in a particular geography, if a buyer is a known buyer, if a seller is a known seller, and if they're using this kind of payment method, by history we know they are like good actors, so we'll let it pass, and maybe we'll track them through different mechanisms later on. So how do I then tier different sellers and different buyers and build a system where this regulation should not be directly applicable to all the sellers and buyers, but only to a specific few with certain flags. So you have to push the boundaries on in both directions. You just can't say, "Hey, okay, this is the regulation. Will just implement it across." You have to be smart. Like, what does the regulation means? What is the interpretation of the regulation? And obviously, you have to do it with the legal team. You can't do it based on I feel this happens. And if legal is fine, if they have the take that if the regulatory body comes tomorrow and asks what are the mechanisms in place for certain regulation, you have the right answers and you can defend those. Once you have that clarified, then you work with the tech team and the CX team to creatively maneuver your CX and your systems on how we can implement certain things with minimum impact to user experience, because that is the primary key. I cannot have too many frictions when a user is buying certain stuff. So, what are the other creative ways? And again, I can't go much into detail, but there can be different ways where you can do KYCs, but not in the actual buying flow. So you have to be smart about it. Uh, so yeah, but yeah, that's I think that's the biggest challenge for a not just compliance PM, any PM, because if you are a marketplace PM, if you are a payments PM, you have to go through these requirements in any kind of marketplace, in any kind of company, small, medium, big. So this is like a constant challenge.
Yeah, and actually, and I think you kind of gave some really brilliant examples and the various. I think the I would say constant trade-offs and the managing the stakeholders that a PM has to do. So over the years, especially somebody operating
Mhm.
in the compliance space, what has been some of the skills that you have acquired that helps you to get into, let's say, a win-win situation with your compliance stakeholders? Like it's boring, like talking to legal compliance. Sometimes you will also have to do with, let's say, external agencies, or there could be business operations teams, or there could
Yeah.
be downstream upstream teams with whom you have to kind of make a lot of people understand
Mhm.
what is important and what is that you cannot do with it. So what is your
Okay.
way to deal with
Okay.
it?
Yeah, this can be controversial, but the idea is, I agree, partially agree. I can't say it on record that talking to legal compliance can be boring. Uh, but especially, I think the skill that you need is when you're talking to legal or compliance, you should be talking as a PM, which is heavily compliance focused, and you treat them as an ally because. One thing I've observed is, especially with legal compliance and these teams, they have this in mind that the tech team is they treat them as a roadblocker, as a cost center, and they're not treated well enough. And because they're not doing it out of their sheer will, they're doing it because it's necessary. So I
Hmm.
think treating them more as an ally helps because in my experience what I've observed is if you're on good terms with your legal team and first you try and listen and try to be friends with them, then in return they'll probably try to listen how your product is actually working, and because they are at the best place, especially in this scenario, to come up with creative solutions which are legally correct, right? So if they can partner when you are having that brainstorming session with your CX and your legal can be there, that hey, we are trying to do this, does it make sense, and the legal is actually aligned, yes. Because once your legal partner says okay, we want to work in more customer obsessed way as well, and we'll provide legal guidance on what can be done, cannot be done, and we'll try to be as lenient as possible. That's the biggest win because in general, what happens, I think a lot of people would relate. Whenever you go to legal, the first answer is no, and then it's like until proven otherwise, they'll allow certain things. But if you're on like good terms, if you treat them as an ally, when I say good terms, it's like when you kind of respect what they're bringing to the table because it's necessary, that's why they are there. Otherwise, they won't be there, right? So every function has their own part. And if you treat them as an ally, um, keep them with you, try and explain your part, but at the same time understand what they are trying to bring. If you can have that kind of relation, it becomes easier. Although like compliance requirements won't go away, there'll be a lot of restrictions that also will still there, but then you can reach to the optimum solution much faster. Otherwise, if you build solutions in silos and then go to legal, they'll they'll provide feedback. There'll be five different changes. You'll again work with the CX or your tech team. Will again go back and and they'll keep evaluating. They'll be like, oh, this is wrong. We cannot do this. We don't have this much risk appetite, and so on and so forth. So you basically can easily cut short that development time or brainstorming time if you bring both on the same table, and you know what the risk appetite is very clearly. And somehow I've observed the risk appetite increases if you treat them as ally. So
Yeah, yeah,
that has been my experience, especially with
yeah.
legal compliance, these stakeholders.
True. No, no, I mean, they play a very, very important part, especially from, making sure that you're doing the right thing both for your business
Hmm.
as well as for your customers. Very
Yeah.
important that everybody plays their part well, and it is like a well-oiled machine. They all understand
Hmm.
what they bring to the table, and in unison, it's a good experience for the customer.
Yes, it's again much easier to say. It's not like it has always happened with my projects or where I have worked. It's easier to say, but because mostly when you go in such rooms, it's a versus situation. It's a compliance legal team versus the tech team. Tech team is not understanding what compliance needs or like compliance requirements, and compliance folks are like tech people do not understand how serious this can be, and that's your and then to resolve the situation, the PM, right, like that's your job. And there's no compliance PM. There will be always marketplace PM. You won't be just a PM for compliance. Mostly, you'll be building products, and compliance would be a part of the requirement. So as a PM, then you need to act as advocate for both and understand this context really well to bring them together. So that's part of the job. I
Yeah.
feel it should be part of the job.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. And context of that, right? I mean, you spoke about some of the use cases, right? Whether it is
Mhm.
identification, KYC identification, or there is fraud detection and transaction monitoring and all that. I mean, these are the way where you are translating a solution for a problem that a compliance team or the regulatory
Mhm.
requirements will come up, right? So I actually want to kind of deep dive a little bit over here, Apurva, because I know you're also a very passionate, AI tech leader, right? So I think one question, a huge thank you to Apurva. What a powerful conversation. I hope you enjoyed part one of this conversation. And I can't wait to tell you what coming up in part two. So if you haven't subscribed already, do hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. And a huge shout out to all our viewers. Your support keeps this podcast alive. Before you go, we have something very excited lined up. We are soon launching our AI for Product Leaders, a 3 hour workshop, which is going to happen in person in Bangalore in a 3 hour workshop where we are inviting product leaders, founders, entrepreneurs, AI enthusiasts. So you can check out in the YouTube description of this video. So don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn, subscribe to our Substack newsletter, DM me on Instagram, tweet me in @PTWM, and listen to all our episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcast. See you next time.